Hello everyone, welcome to today's YouTube tutorial. Today we'll be having a look at one of my Substance Designer materials. It's this sort of hand-painted lava kind of tile. It's got quite a few cool features. It's a very easy material to make, so it's perfect for beginners. So let's just have a look at what I've exposed for the user. So we've got just the basic color, so we can just sort of change the color here. That's very cool. And then we've got the ability to get rid of the lava on the large cracks and increase that and decrease that. And then we've got the ability to make the lava rise, just rises above those small cracks. And then we've got the ability to turn off the lava altogether. And if we do that, then we can put this grass that sort of sits behind it, and it's just sitting there. So that could be kind of cool with the tiles on a higher level than a different part of the level that could be lower down next to lava, kind of like in Minecraft or something. So we'll just put this back to the default like so, and let's jump into what I've done. So I have a shape node here. It's just a standard square, nothing going on. I'm feeding it into tile sampler down here and a tile sampler up here. Let's start with this tile sampler here, because this is where the shape is actually getting built. So basically we just put a tile sampler down, and then we change the X amount and Y amount to 6 and 6, and this is how much it's tiling, so it's like 6 and 6 that way and 6 down sort of thing. And it's on pattern input, so it's reading the square. You could just use the square because I'm not actually changing the shape at all, but just for tidiness I've just cut it on pattern input. Next thing that I've done is change the size to 0.81 on the X and 0.81 on the Y, and then the total scale of the tile is going to be 1.62. Now we do that so we eliminate all the black lines that are sort of present in the tile to begin with. So you'll notice if I bring this down, once it loads, you can see it here, we get more of a sort of uniform sort of look. And then if I bring it down even more, you should be able to see it here. Here we go. You'll see we've got these intersection lines, and now we wanted to get rid of these intersection lines and create a sort of more interesting shape. So we've just put the scale up to 1.62 and 0.81 and 0.81, and that sort of merges some of them together, as well as just gets rid of these lines, and that just gives us a cooler looking tile. So we get these sort of L-shaped tiles and stuff. Next, what you want to do, push that by accident. Alright, there we go. Next, what you want to do is come down to this color random section. Now I've got it at 0.48. You'll see what it looks like when it's on 0. You won't see anything. It'll just be white. You'll be like, oh no, it's broken. What have I done? It is not working. But don't worry, because it's working just fine. You just need to put this onto a color so that you have a color. So that's cool. So once you've got something that looks sort of similar to this, some shapes merging in together, you're like, cool, this could be a cool shape. Then it's time to sort of make it an actual tile and usable. So we're going to be using this sort of edge detect here. Now this is a very cool node, very simple. But what it does, it sort of finds all the like white grayscale values, and it will sort of draw lines where it thinks it sees lines. So you'll notice here that there's sort of these lines here, and it will just sort of trace those lines and give you this sort of tile look to it, and it will trace around all the L-shaped ones as well, and you'll get these L-shaped ones, so that's cool. The width is at 1 and the edge roundness is at 1.24 for that. Then we're going to be using a flood fill. Now I'm using a flood fill because it's very good for getting variation and everything, and it's just a very powerful node and saves a lot of work and time. So it's probably the fastest way you can sort of create variation is with this flood fill node. Very good node. So that's just been pushed into the sort of flood filter box size. Now what that is doing is it's grabbing the different size tiles and applying a different grey color to each of those tiles. So the smaller the tile, the darker the grey. excuse me, and the bigger the tile, the lighter the grey. So that's really good because, like, as we know, the darker it is, the lower down it's going to be. The lighter it is, the more it's going to pop. So that gives us this sort of optic illusion sort of thing to make it look like the tiles are sort of coming out more at you than they actually really are. And I'm just sort of pushing this through levels, and I've just sort of moved up this grey very slightly to sort of lighten it up a little bit. Nothing too crazy. We're then also using the flood fill node in these two nodes here, and they're both the same node. It's the flood filter gradient. Basically all this is doing is I've set the angle to like just this bottom corner here, which is negative 1.48, can be anything you want, and then I've put the angle variation to 1. And what this does is it will assign a linear gradient to each tile that you feed it, and then if you put random variation, you get it in all sorts of different directions, and that's exactly what we want. So we've done the same thing down here, and we've just changed the angle so we get a different result. Right here you'll see that I'm trying to control this gradient with a gradient map. Now you'll make sure you remember to set this to grayscale, because otherwise it won't plug in. If I do this, it just breaks everything. So leave that grayscale. So once that's at grayscale, just duplicate that, put it down there, and hook it back up. So what I've done here, I've placed 2 white points in the center, and then we've got 2 black ones in the corners, and then I'll just push them out. And you'll see what happens when I push this back in is sort of bevels it in. So this is a way we can sort of control how the sort of shape, the big bulk of the shape forms, and like we can really mold it into what we want based on what kind of gradients we've got. So after we've done that, we just blend it in together. You can do 2 more of these, and you get 1 on each angle, and that could be kind of cool, but I've just used 2 for this. So just blending that in with a min darken on an opacity of 1. So very simple, it just merges them together. Nothing crazy going on there. Then finally we want to combine this one together with our sort of flood fill one that's giving us the sort of height differences. Now what we're going to do with that is just add a multiply, and that will darken everything up, but that's just fine. That's all we really need. After that, we're up to the part where we're sort of deforming the shape. So we've got our basic shape already, and this is basically the shape. You're pretty much done. But now it's time to sort of deform it and start sort of stylizing it a little bit. So we've got sort of this blend node here, and you'll see that it's sort of plugged in over here, and I'm using that to sort of give me these shapes. But this is where I've got 2 masks. The first mask is made up of a Perlin noise. Now the scale of Perlin noise is at 6, disorder at 0, everything else is the same. It's pretty standard little Perlin noise. Then I'm running it through a histogram scan. Now what a histogram scan does is it was sort of, it's really good for crushing the values to really give you sharp values. So you'll see that like all these sort of darker bits here are now merging together and turning into this solid sort of color. And that's the sort of thing you need when you're creating a mask. Now what I'm doing is I'm blending these 2 together. And that sort of gives me like this new type of mask that I'm going to apply as I'm sort of blending in my deformations and stuff. So the reason I'm using this when it's a grey, it's like, oh, you wouldn't use a grey in a mask, but what it's doing is it's giving me a sort of lighter coat to it. So rather than completely removing it from the material altogether, we're completely removing it from these areas, and like maybe 50% of the deformations on these tiles are being removed. So that just gives me a slightly bit more control, and that's just something I did like after I'd finished the material to sort of tweak it a little bit more. But you can do it now, so that's there. You know it works. So first things first, this sort of material is actually plugged into this one down here. So what is this one doing for us? So this is like the the one that's sort of chipping away at our edges here. So you see these sort of chips here. So the way we're doing that is we've created this little noise down here. So this is just your sort of clouds 1. And this is what it normally looks like. Now it looks like that because it's just that it's standard parent, and that's just at whatever resolution you have set your material to. So it's obviously going to be a standard square, 248 by 248 in this case, but then this one is 512 by 128, and that's because I've moved these down. Now the reason I did that was because it gives you this sort of blurred look. It stretches it out. It just gives you a different kind of noise. I mean, because it's black and white anyway, it doesn't matter if the noise is really high definition, especially if it's a stylized texture. You can sort of get away with it. Then I'm just sort of blurring it again with a intensity of 2.56. That's just to give it a bit more blur, because again, stylized textures usually have a little bit of a blur to them anyway. And it was still quite sharp at this point because it was still kind of sharp. It's kind of pixely. That gets rid of all those pixels and blends them together. Then we got a directional warp here, and we're blending it in with our gradient. And then this is what's sort of driving a lot of the sort of chipping of the edge. It sort of gives us a bit more variation on how this material is moving. So if we want to move the material across a little bit, we can do that and get a different result. So we can do that. It's not really doing too much. You can probably just skip this altogether. Then it's into a slope blur. Now the slope blur is samples of 32 and intensity of 0.08, and it's on a min. Because if we push this up too high, then we just start destroying our shape and we get some really ugly results. I mean, in some cases that might be kind of cool. You might be able to make some rocks out of that if you just sort of isolate these and pop them out. Yeah, you'll be able to find a use for it somewhere. But for this case, we don't want that. We just want subtle. Want to do a thing. If it's subtle, it's good. So let's just go with that. So then we're just blending it back together with our previous one. So this is a sort of sharp corners, and then we've got this sort of real broken sort of look to it. But then we still want to sort of keep the flushness of each tile, because tiles are often quite flush anyway. So we want to make sure we retain that so we don't have gaps in our material. Then it's into merging it again, or slope blurring it again, sorry, and we're going to use another Perlin noise. We could just use the Perlin noise up here because it's exactly the same Perlin noise pretty much. I think it's just a difference of 1, so barely anything, not worth sort of using 2 different noises if the scale's only a difference by 1, but you can always clean that up later on once you finish the material. Then it's into the slope blur with samples 32, intensity of 0.62, and it's on a blur this time. Now that just sort of gives you this sort of drunk sort of look, so it's like woola woola woola, like kind of warps it a bit. Normally I would probably just want to use a warp node. It often gives you warp node or a directional warp even. That will give you, and then just plug the Perlin noise straight into it and then plug that into it. And now, yeah, look at that. It pretty much just gives you what you're looking for anyway. So you could do it that way and plug it in that way, or you can do it the slope blur way. And that's just, I kind of liked how it sort of blurred the edges a little bit because I was wanting it to sort of bleed over each other a little bit. Yeah, then we're doing the same thing again, just blended it in with itself, and that's to sort of retain these sort of sharp edges again. I think gives us this sort of shape. Now we're here. Now we're doing good. We're doing good. Still alive. Still chugging away. All right. Then it's sorry. That's on a copy and an opacity of 0.15. So yeah. So we don't want it to be too opaque because then we're not getting enough of one shape and not enough of another shape and that sort of thing. Oh, and we're also plugging another mask into that shape. Cool. Now it's onto the cracks. So we're just sort of, this is the area where we essentially just blending all these little things together. So from this point onwards, so that's kind of cool. So we're almost there already. But you'll notice we're using a mask for this one, we've got this in the background, and then down here we've got cracks. So this brings us back to the start of the graph where we've got cracks masking. Now this is essentially just the same tile sampler, so you could just duplicate this tile sampler, place it here, plug this in here, and then you've got your pattern input, doobity-doo, all that kind of stuff. Again, you could just use the square, but I'm just using this just in case you want to change this shape later on, or like warp it a little bit or something. You can do that, but in this case we didn't want to do that. So it's exactly the same material in every way, shape and form, except the only difference is we're using this function down here. If we can find it here, right here, the mask by random. Now that's at 0.85. You notice when I sort of plug this back, now you'll sort of see these sort of cracks are going absolutely everywhere now. So that might be something you sort of want, so you can just sort of play with that. But in my case, I just wanted a few cracks, and specifically on the bigger tiles. I didn't want the smaller tiles to get too much affected. So we're plugging this tile sampler into a histogram scan. Now the histogram scan is just at a position of 0.25, and that's just sort of it helps give us that, narrows it down and sharpens things up and all that kind of stuff. So it does what it does, if that makes sense. And not only that, if you want to sort of change the thing, like you push this up, now we've got rid of this tile up here, and you can do that. So it's more than anything, it's just for control. So you're welcome to keep that or get rid of it. But I like to have control throughout the whole process. And since it's not a very large material, you might as well. Then we're just blurring it, and that's just so the cracks don't just stop suddenly. And then we just got a little blend node that's literally not doing anything. It's just for tidiness, I guess. You could probably just get rid of this and just have that, but that's on max lighten and on opacity of 1 if you do want to use a blend node, but it is not required. Then we can plug that into opacity right here, and now that's ready to go. Then we need to create our cracks. So the cracks are just the tile sampler again. We've got a 9 and an 8. We're using a disc pattern, and we're just stretching it a little bit. So we've got the size on the X at 0.21, and the size on the Y is at 3.95. Other than that, we've got some size random coming along, and of the Y is at 0.73. If we just change that, it just sort of changes the randomness of the Y size. So that could be kind of cool. So just sort of play around with it. It's just sort of put some random values in till you get something you like. The scale is at 0.13 because we want to make sure they're lines, and then we've got a scale random of 0.88. Now that's just again just to give us a bit more variation when we go and create our sort of cracks, because this is a kind of I can't remember what it's called, like voltaic sort of style of making cracks. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but it's very cool, very handy, and definitely a valuable resource. So we put the position at 0.3 and offset 0.5, just play around with these values, and then a color random of 0.85. This is an important one to have. So you can still play around with this feature, but you want to make sure you're using the color random, because if you're not using the color random, it's not going to work so great. Then it's pushing it into histogram scan, position of 1, contrast, and that's just to give us these solid lines, because we need no gray values, just the blacks and the white. So that gets rid of the grays. Then we're using our distance nodes. Now what we do for distance node is we push our tile sampler into the source, and then we can plug a mask into it. And that gives us this sort of, I think it sort of finds the distance between each point, and then creates this sort of shape to it. I don't even know how to really explain it. I just know it sort of does this sort of thing. I don't remember where I saw this, but it was somewhere online. It was very cool. But you make sure you put the on grayscale and then a maximum distance of 5,000. And then you'll have some cool cracks, because it's always much better to make your own sort of cracks. These are different cracks. These aren't just the standard cells one kind of cracks that you see everywhere. Then we push it into edge detect, and that sort of will find the edges, and we can sort of add a bit of a roundness to it to give it a little bit more of a chipping effect to it. And then we've got a slope blur grayscale. Now this slope blur grayscale is really good because it will sort of again chip away at these edges, give you a bit more of a sort of gradient to it, so it's leading into the crack, so it doesn't just immediately crack. And we're blending that with just a clouds 2, and again I've just changed its size to 512 and 256. Then we're going to slope blur again for samples of 32 and a intensity of 0.23 and a min. Then it's a blur, HD blur. It's just a little bit of a blur because it was getting a bit jagged. I wanted to sort of pull that back because it is still quite stylized. I want to make sure it keeps its smoothness. Then we're up to a directional warp, and we put the intensity up to 12.06, and that's just going to warp it a little bit for us and give us a bit more randomness. Then we use a purl and noise using the same technique we did a few times, and the scale's at 7 again. Finally, it's on to plugging it into here, and then that gives us, and we'll make sure it's on a multiply for 1 and at opacity of 0.08. Then I push it for us safe transform, and that was just so I could just sort of test things out, try to find a tile that I liked, and you can just sort of play around with that. Not necessary, you can skip that little step. But now we're on to this little section, which is where we're going to be adding sort of divots to the material. Now the divots are very simple. They're just a normal shape. It's just a paraboloid, and it's a tine of 1, scale of 0.5. That's about it really. And then we're just doing a non-uniform blur, and we're just plugging it into itself, and then you just push the intensity up to 50, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word, but you put it at 0.28 and the asymmetry at 0.27. You put the angle at 0.33 and then samples at 16 and blades at 9. That'll give you this sort of a more, it's almost smoother, sort of more rounded sort of look, sort of like how the divots look when you sort of how you'd sculpt them into your thing. So you get a nice smooth look to it. Then we want to sort of just give it a quick little directional warp, and that's just warped with a nice purl and noise. So that's at 50%. And then we'd put this on scale 4 this time. Again, you could probably reuse some of the purl and noises. There's a lot of purl and noise. I really liked purl and noise for this material for some reason. But yeah, then we're using a tile sampler, and that's just what we're going to be using to sort of scatter them around. So you sort of see them here. That's another divot there. So that's at 8 and then 6. Pattern input. And then the size of 1, size random 0.31, and there's 0.28. And the scale's been put down to 0.32. Scale random at 0.66. Finally, we're just doing a little bit of a position random. You got to be careful with this one because sometimes you can make your texture not tileable if you overdo it. But offset is okay, so I just put that 0.5. Then rotation random, there's a little bit of rotation random there, 0.59, that's just to give it more variation. And then we've got a little bit of a mask, and that just sort of reduces the amount of divots we've got on screen at once. We can leave that at higher or lower or whatever we want. I'm going to leave that higher for now. Then we've got the color random, yep, we'll cover that, cool. Then we want to invert the grayscale because we want it to go inwards and not outwards. And then it's into a blend, and we're putting that onto the foreground because we want that to be on top and this to be in the background because that's going to be on the bottom. Now we are using this as a sort of mask as well. I don't think it is that crucial. Okay, yeah, so that's just making sure it goes in on those specific areas. Yeah, so do put the mask there. So then we're pushing into a histogram range, and then we'll just put that at 0.5 in a position of 0.5, and that's just to sort of, even things out. So there's not so, because it's quite dark and light, and it just sort of evens it out for me. And then we're up to another blend, and this is where we're putting some of the lava cracks. So we're getting there, we're almost there. Yeah, so where does this one start? We'll go woo, right here. Okay, here we go. So we start with a clouds 2. It's just a normal clouds 2. I don't think I'm even really doing anything, it's just scale 1. And then we're mixing it with a black and white spot, scale 1, disorder 0, roughness 1. That's a pretty cool little texture, gives us a nice little effect there. And then we got to do the opacity on 1 and min darken, because we want to sort of add those darks to those darks sort of thing. Then we're slope blurring it with itself. That gives us this sort of, it's like a snowy look. And then we're blurring it. And then we're applying our cracks from down here, because we want to make sure we reuse these cracks. But then they're not exactly the same cracks, they have been transformed to deed. And then you just sort of shrink it down like that, and you just push ×2, that one right there, and that will give you that. So then we just push that into the foreground and that to the background, and then we get this shape sort of like this. Then we have to push it into yet another histogram scan. Now what this is going to be doing is it's going to grab all these darker values and basically try and fully make them go away and go, yeah, like this. So it's just like taking chunks out of the cracks, because the cracks are sort of being used as like the base of the texture. Then once that's done, we can start blending it with our other masks. So we've got this sort of thing here happening. Now we have to go up here. Sorry for the messiness of this. I did not organize it very well. So we just got that sort of slope blur here. We're just going back here. Just go to slope blur and then a histogram scan and change the position of 0.80 and a 0.89 on the contrast. And that's just to sort of highlight these little tiles here. And then once we've highlighted those tiles, then we know we're in the clear. Then we're inverting the grayscale. Then we're doing a histogram scan, position of 1, contrast of 0. And then we've fully got those tiles taken out safely. And then we're doing an invert grayscale into the blend node finally, and we're back here again. There's a bit of fine surgery involved in getting these to actually work well together, but once you get there, you're good. So this is just a normal copy, and the opacity is at 1, but this is one of the values of of exposed. So this is the one that sort of controls the cracks and makes them appear and disappear based on this blend, and that sort of blends between this one and this one here. So what we're doing next is we've got our sort of blend. Man, this is terribly messy. I am so sorry. Next we want to push create another blend node, and we're grabbing the other mask. So we went from this mask to this mask. We're pushing this mask into this mask, and this is where we put our sort of bigger cracks into. So these are our bigger cracks here. The bigger cracks get pushed into this node, min darken, and we have to mix it for white, uniform color white, just so that it's on a white white background. Finally, back here again. We mixed that together for min darken, and then we've now successfully mixed our small cracks with our large cracks. Woo! Then we're up to the levels. We're just sort of adjusting them a little bit, getting some tweaking happening. I've just sort of moved the overall black value, crunched it a little bit towards the white, and then it sort of goes up into the emissive, and this is where we create the emissive map. So it's just an invert grayscale here, and then into a blend node. And the blend node is just a min darken of a pearl and noise, and that's what gives us these sort of dotty sort of looks to it. And then it's into a gradient map. That's sort of what's coloring these dots specifically. And then we can just push it just straight into the emissive, and that's how that works. And that's the lava and the cracks actually. Yeah, so if we go up here, where are we? That one. Boom. All right. So if we go up here, because we're going to go back up here, because this is the sort of where we created the mask. We're back to where we created that sort of mask of the cracks. And we'll see that we didn't just put this node into there, which then led to the emissive. We also put it into here, which is where we are blending the sort of cracks with our original shape. So we take our original shape and we push it through the blend, and then we get on a copy, lower it, and then we can see our sort of cracks coming through. And then we've got to do an auto levels, and that brings us back our values, and then it's back to a blend, which is just something I just put there. I'm not really sure why. I think it was just for simple sakes. Often when I make a normal map, I'll put a blend node before the normal map, then I can sort of add things beforehand. So that's probably why that's like that. So this is going into the normal map. We put it on 25, and it's OpenGL. Or is it DirectX? Oh, it's on DirectX. OpenGL's like that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's on DirectX. Then you can just plug your normal map into the normal map slot. Now the normal map's done, we can then move on to the color map, and then we'll be pretty much done, except for the grass, which we'll just cover in a little bit, but it won't take too long. So you grab your normal map, plug it into two curvature maps. There's a curvature smooth and a regular curvature. Curvature is like a harsh line look, and the smooth one's like a blended one. Now the reason we want to use these is that the hand painted sort of look, they always like color the edges of things, and it always has this nice little blend to it, but then it has a sort of hard sort of feel to it, and that's why if we merge both these, we can at 50% we can sort of start getting that sort of hand painted look and start trying to sort of bridging the gap between hand painted and procedural. Once we got that, we then can just plug it into a gradient map and start coloring it. So we can pick any colors you want. This is like the sort of default color I've got going, that I've even also got just plugged into here as a multi-switch. I usually plug all my colors into multi-switches, and you can just switch them on the fly and see what one you like and see how we go. But anyway, you just pick your colors. You just click like this and then just pick some colors. You could click on this little pick gradient thing and drag across something. I'm not gonna do that, but you can drag across an image and grab those colors and use those colors if you like, and that would definitely work. But the main thing you want to do is try and find the sweet spot on where these these edge lines are. The edge line for this one's like here, so if I just pull this back, we can see it just changes that. So just play around with that until you get something you like. Then it's time to start blending the two elements. So there's two elements here. We've got the main tile here, and then we've also got the grass that will appear under this tile. So we haven't made the grass yet, but it's still a good idea to get it ready for when we do put the grass in. So basically what you're doing is you just put this in the background, and then you want to grab your this one here. So it's just this mask here. You could just plug that straight into here immediately, and then you can just start coloring it. Just start coloring that mask, and that will start giving you just the basic colors of your grass until you can get your grass actually in there. So just color that, put a hue saturation, and then push it into the blend, opacity, copy, and then you should have two on top of each other. Once you've got that, we can then move down to how to make the grass, and we can change it all there. Cool. So the grass, we start with a waveform 1. The samples is at 1024, size minimum 0, and then size max is a 0.25, and then we've got a 1 for the wave number, and then the noise is at 0.03, and the pattern of 3. Now that will give us this sort of shape here, and that will make up the bulk of that grass. Then we can transform 2D it just to rotate it. Then we want to subtract with an opacity of 1 the grass with a sort of gradient map. So we just grab a gradient map, flip it 180, put a little node here so you can control it a little bit. You'll see what we can do here. If we just move this, it sort of moves it down, and then if we move this up, or is it this one? I think it's this one. Yeah, there you go. If you move the white up, then it will move it up closer. So you can cut off the bottom part of the grass, because we don't want that piece of grass, because it won't look like a piece of grass. Next, what we want to do is get another gradient map. It's just a normal gradient map, just in case we want to control it, and have a curve. And curves are very cool because we can create like they're very good at making like a little warping effect for your directional warps and stuff. And you just create a directional warp and just leave it there and just plug it into this little intensity input. Then you just grab your blend, grab another blend, and put it on multiply, and we want to put gradient linear 1 with a gradient map of something like this. So we want to create a line like that, just because we want a seam, because the grass tends to have like a stem or something coming through the middle of it. So if we do that, then blend it in, then that should give us our stem. And that's all very good. And then we can auto levels it, and we get our levels back. And then we're back to our direction warp, just put that in the input, and put the directional warp at 17.92. Finally, we can transform 2D it just to try to put it sort of near the center, because it'll work better in the end if it's sort of closer to the center. Then just a little non-uniform blur just to soften it up a little bit, because it is still quite hard. Finally, now we can get a Perlin noise. I'm going to start Perlin noise, put it on 9. You can use a Gaussian noise or whatever. I'm just using a Perlin, just because I've used Perlin for literally everything in this graph at the moment. But I like the noise, so it's pretty good. Then we push it for levels, and then we want to crunch the levels a little bit so that we get more of the darker values out of it. So I've just moved the grays out to the right. Then we can put a tile sampler here, and this time we're going to be using a few more of the maps. So first of all, I'm going to turn the grass on, just so we can see what's happening. Otherwise we won't be able to see anything here in this little viewport, and that's kind of it's not so good. So what we want to do is we want to create a normal map from this, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's there because we want to use this vector map input as well as use the sort of scale map input of this one. So this one has to be a grayscale, and to use a vector map input it needs an RGB, and that happens to be a normal map. So now that we've got those two maps plugged in, we can then put our patterns in. I'm using 3 patterns, so you can put on pattern input and then pattern number, put it on 3, and just put it 3 times. I've got an amount of 100 on the X and Y. And then if we scroll down very carefully, we see the size of X is 2.59 and the Y is 5.86. You know, you can play around with this depending on what kind of grass you want and all this kind of stuff, but if you just want my specific settings, feel free to use them. The size random, just push the Y up to 0.51 and then the X down to 0, and put the scale up to 4.24. Scale random should be at 0.16 and then scale map multiplier at 0.53. Now the scale map multiplier is using, where is it, this one, whoop, that one, this map right here. So it will scale things based off this sort of information. So it will it'll scale it like outwards sort of thing, in like a more natural sort of way, because we want the grass to do that sort of thing. So if we scroll down all the way though, we should see right here, we go, the offset is 0.5, so it's pretty standard. Almost everybody puts a 0.5 or some sort of offset like that, but that keeps it procedural. Put a rotation of just whatever you like. You kind of want the grass to be facing away from each other, and the way you get that to happen is you've got to turn this vector map multiplier to 1, and that'll be using this normal map thing here. So having it facing away from each other like that, I had to put the rotation up this way, but depending on like what noise you're using and stuff, it may vary a little bit, so just play around with it. Yours could be down that way or this way or what or anything really. So yeah, put a little bit of random rotation just to make it a little bit more organic. And then we've got some pan center. Yeah, what else have we got? Oh, color random. There's a little bit of color random. That's just to give it a little bit more depth. You can play around with that again. And we've got the color, whatever that word is, onto scale. And then yeah, that means it's going to use the scale map to sort of, you know, predict the color. So the darker patches will only be where the scale says it's smaller or whatever, or bigger. Yeah, so that's how that works. And finally, I think that's us. Then we can move up here to where a histogram scan. We're just sort of controlling values a bit, bringing it back for position 0.4. Then I have a little mask because I didn't want grass absolutely everywhere. Because I wanted parts to have some dirt seen through, and that's what this little section here is. So it's just a little simple mask, Gaussian noise this time, just because I thought I'd change it up a little bit. Then we've got a histogram scan, my favorite node, and then position 0.63, contrast of 1, and then a blur, and then we put it in, then we get something like that, and then it's time to do a dirt. And the dirt was like just a normal dirt. I didn't really try too hard with the dirt, just sort of trying things out. I just blended a couple of dirts together and just went with it, and then blended that one in there as a copy using the mask created here, so that it only puts it in these little areas here, because if I don't want the dirt in the grass, isn't quite what I was going for. So then just a simple blur, HQ blur, and that's just quality of 1. I mean, that's just there just in case, because I think I was just quality testing. I was like, maybe I want to blur a little bit more, because you never know. You might want to blur it depending on what your grass is. I didn't blur it in this case. This node could be removed. I'm going to leave it there so I can customize it and fix things up as I go along. Then we've got over here. Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, my bad. So we do. Then when we blend these two together, we want to make sure we put it for a normal map as well, because then we can get it for a curvature. And then once we get it for a curvature, we can blend it through here again, and that will give us these edges on the grass, which is important. So yeah, so do that. and that's on 0.72 as an opacity. Once you come all the way up here, then we're finally back up here and you can color it. So we should have our edges all lit up for us, and it should color reasonably well, and then just blend it together and, you know, just do as you please, really. It's all up to you at that point. As for the other maps, the roughness map and metallic map, they're just little not uniform color nodes because I never planned on using them in the game. So the main goal was just to use the normal map and the diffuse. And then we do have the height map though, which is just the normal to height thing. You just plug the normal map into the normal to height node, and then you plug it to the height. And same goes for the ambient occlusion, except for you just grab the blend node just before the normal map and plug it into the ambient occlusion. And then you can change just a few details here, and yeah, then you should be good. Other than that, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.